in my opinion, part of the problem of trading cards is sometimes you have an emotional attachment to the card, and then
Okay.
you have too much sentimental value attached to that card, and then you'll often be.
Welcome to another timeless moment brought to you by the You Can't Comp This NBA Trading Card Podcast. If you like the video, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you want to support the show, please hit that subscribe button and tick that bell so you get notified whenever we go live. See you in the comments. And today we are going to really wind back after our trade day at Fast Break Trading Cards. We're going to really simplify it this week. Let's talk about conducting a trade. Something easy or something simple. Something that appears to be simple. How's that?
Well, in theory, it's simple, isn't it?
Yeah. I want a card. They have cards.
That's right.
We should trade those cards.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work that way, though, I feel.
I will let you kick this one off, man.
Yeah.
You're far more passionate about this than I am.
Oh, look. It's funny because I'm not a trader myself. I struggle in the trading space, and maybe I've selfishly put this on the Timeless Moments run sheet for my own benefit. But I do. I turn up to trade days. I go to card shows, and I try and have my little box of trades and things that I'm prepared to part with in the hope that somebody wants to sort of get a deal done. And I'm sort of, I struggle, and I don't know about the listeners out there, but I struggle with I want something that somebody else has. But what happens when I have nothing they want?
Yeah.
For me, it's a just deal with it and offer the money for it. Generally, but what happens when you're not in the same space? How do you find it? You do a lot of trades from what I've seen.
Yeah. So I think you can approach trades in many different ways. So I think the best way, and the way that I enjoy approaching trades, is that I basically have a dedicated trade box. So what I mean by that is they're all cards that I've picked up basically for the sole purpose of trading them.
Mm-hmm.
And my sort of goal is, you might have seen those sort of videos online where people are doing like the trade up trade. Well, basically that's my sort of whole idea, is that, I've got a $10 card and I trade it with something else to get a $20 card, or I trade a $10 card with $10 of cash. Now I've got a $20 card, and that's my sort of my whole idea, is to keep rolling it up until eventually it's good, and then I want to put it into my collection, and then the sort of the process begins again. So that's the way that I approach it, and I think the reason why I do that, it's very deliberate, because I think, in my opinion, part of the problem of trading cards is sometimes you have an emotional attachment to the card, and then you have too much sentimental value attached to that card, and then you'll often be over emotional about the card and or attach too high a value to what the card is worth. So I think that's a really big barrier for me to sort of step through and make it just really simplified. So it's like, here are the cards I've got. Do you want these cards? Yes or no? No, you don't. Okay, great. And then you sort of just move on. And so just to sort of tease that out a little bit more too, I think, because it is so difficult to trade cards with people, sometimes I think you have to sort of go in with the expectation of just let somebody have a look at your cards. Let them enjoy the experience of flicking through your cards. There might be something in there that they want.
Yeah. Okay.
And so then you can do that, because otherwise, not that, you're going to take it personal, but, there might be that sort of element of, why don't you want my cards? Or, it's just really hard to do that. And I think if you're comparing that to, say, eBay, where you might get a few hundred people looking at your card before someone purchases it or bids on it or whatever. So if you've only got, say, 5 or 6 people, flicking through your box, it's sort of unreasonable to think someone's going to want that card sort of, straight away. So
interesting.
That's something else that I'd like to comment on.
Yeah, that's different. For from my side, I struggle to start the process because I look at other people's stuff and there's stuff I don't want. But I guess from your situation, it's more of a just trying to get the next something above what the current card you
Yeah,
value that
because
card at. Yeah. Okay.
like real. So just say you've got a list of cards that you want. There's 10 cards, and again, like, what's the chance you're going to find one of those 10 cards in someone's box? And that's the other thing too. Like, I think
Sure.
you have to be super. In my opinion, you have to be super flexible about picking up trades and sort of. I'm not saying pick up stuff that you don't want, but pick up stuff that maybe you wouldn't put into your PC. And the
Hmm.
main idea of picking that up is to trade it on in the future. I think as long as you're getting, you know, a good price or a good trade value for it, it makes it easy to move that on
Yeah.
into the future. So,
Okay.
you know, maybe a classic example of that is I purchased a LeBron James base PSA 10 on the weekend,
Hmm.
and I can tell you where that's going. That's going straight into my trade box. That's
Of
not something
course.
I
Yep.
particularly want in that, but I can almost guarantee you someone will come along and be like, oh, a LeBron 10, great. Would you be interested in a trade for that? And I feel like
Yeah.
that's the type of thing that would do really well for trades. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Because that was going to be my thing. And this is the amateur version, I guess, coming out of me. I've got on my target list of things that I want to trade for.
Mm,
Um, I've got my PC, obviously.
yeah.
I've got the players that I collect. So
Yeah.
a nice piece. Kobe, Scottie Pippen, like Julius Randle, like then I've got the notables, obviously the big players like your Lucas, Steph, Ja Morant, the LeBron, Jordan.
Yeah.
You see a nice Jordan, you go, yeah, cool. Can we get a deal on that?
Yeah.
And it's not my appetite gets somewhat lessened. And then I suppose the third part is something that yeah, see that could be tradable.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
And so I think to add on to that and sort of take that one more step forward, I think the other thing that people covered is
Hmm.
on card autographs
Interesting.
and then game worn patches. So I think that's something else you can sort of target and make a little
Mm,
bit of a strategy out of it.
mm,
So, and that's probably something I picked up off of guys who are, if you want to call them card flippers or, repack makers.
yeah,
That's something that as they're building up their repacks, that's how they sort of target and that's how they look at things to
yeah,
put things into their products. So I think
totally.
that's another really good way to look at
Okay,
building up your trade box and stuff like that too. So
yeah,
yeah,
okay. And on the flip side, so I think you've made some great points about what to look for when you're engaging in a trade.
yeah,
When you're building that box, what would you recommend to people? Because I just jam anything I think that I'm not wanting to keep, but people that I
mm,
think might want. But I have a variety of values and when I go to a trade date, like it's different if I go to the hobby hangout for argument's sake, like a big
yeah,
trade show versus the local card store. Because if it's a local card store, I bring a lot of lower end stuff for the kids in case there's a kid there that collects, I don't know, that collects Steph Curry. So I can always reach into the box and I've got a $5 Steph that I could just go, here you go, like
yeah,
here's something to get your collection started if you don't have
yeah.
cards.
So I've got cards in there that I think are really nice. So for example, I think maybe the biggest card I've got on my trader box is a Dame Lillard on card autograph, which I think
Nice.
is a very nice card.
Mm-hmm.
But I am not emotionally attached to that card. So I personally
Yeah.
think I'm better off trading that, selling that, at the right price to the right person for
Mm,
something that
mm.
actually probably fit into my collection better, or
Okay.
something with a little bit more higher value that I could, roll or flip onto something else.
Well,
So
yeah.
that's, I sort of look at it like that. So it's sort of stuff that I'm not emotionally attached to. Silver PSA 10 rookie cards, I think, are always, really good. You might pick them up cheaply off eBay.
Okay.
You might have got them off, a different thing. The other thing that I think that I was doing for a while, and I have to admit I haven't done this for a little. It's been a minute, but just going onto eBay and picking up cheap vertical NT RPAs, number to 99. I
Really?
think you'd be really surprised sometimes how cheaply you can pick up some of those, and you never know when someone's like, "Oh, I'm a Cavs collector, I'm a Bulls collector," and they'll want that particular,
Okay.
RPA, and so that's a nice
Yeah.
little trading piece because, again, you can sort of pick them up for say, let's just say plus or minus $50. So you're looking at sort of $40 to $60, but actually, in hand, it's now. I think that's the
Mm.
other thing too about trades. All the cards are going to be in hand, and looking at a vertical NT RPA in your hand, like it's a really nice little piece to
Yeah. Yeah.
feast your eyes on. So I think that makes it easier to trade with guys too. So Yeah.
Yeah, and look, I think high graded anything like PSA 10 draws attention, right? Like
Mm.
it's got that brand recognition
Yeah.
with the PSA 10. So if it's a card that someone's after, it's in the
Yeah.
highest grade it could possibly be, which is
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Yeah, and you've raised the emotional attachment. I like that. I like the idea of your trade box being stuff that you're not attached to.
Yeah.
That's yeah. I think that should be the thing that emotional attachment creates some difficulties with the pricing side of things and the
Yeah.
valuing. Yeah, for sure. I like that a lot.
I think one thing that I was maybe a bit anxious about, or I was worried about, was maybe people going to be rude, declining my cards, or I've never had that experience. I would
Mm,
say 99.99% of people are like
yeah.
actually ultra polite, and they'll
Wow.
go out of their way to sort of say those little niceties. Oh, you've got a nice collection. Oh, you've got a nice box, or whatever. But really, what they're saying is, I don't want any of your trash, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's kind of like a really cool thing about our community. So I think that's
Yeah.
really good.
Okay.
I probably think maybe it's not the last thing I'm going to say, but one thing I think I should have added in a little bit earlier too. I think this is one of the really good ways to keep involved in the hobby when you're on an ultra budget.
Okay.
Because if you've been collecting for 2 or 3 years, you must have at least 10 cards that you'd be very happy just to move along. And I
Yeah.
think that's the perfect thing to, go to the Hobby Hangout XL, go to Collect Fest, whatever. Take
Yeah.
them to the table, see if you can get some cash for them. Okay, no, you can't get some cash for them.
Trades.
Let's go out and do some trades with people, and then maybe you've sold one or two at the tables. Now you've got cash and trade. That makes things so much easier to move forward. Because I think that's what really motivates me. I think sometimes to do trades with people is because I've got so many cards sitting around. I need to do something with them, move them on. And I
Mm,
just think trading them is so much more fun than, like, there's nothing wrong with selling cards. Like, don't get me wrong. I love getting a sale, but
that's fine. Yeah.
I
But
think the
I think
trades are good to do too. So, yeah.
yeah. So would you and this is more of a to sort of get to the end and wrap things up a little bit, but
Mm,
preparing for your first trade box,
mm.
is there a minimum? Is there a maximum? What do you think?
No,
You think there's a
no minimum, no maximum.
yeah.
But I do think that the sort of the middle to high stuff goes a little bit easier.
Okay.
Whereas, low end stuff, I think most people have sort of got the feeling that, you know,
Dime a dozen kind of.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can get them sort of anywhere, and
yeah.
then there
Okay.
might be more something that you would throw in as a trade with somebody, as
Okay.
opposed to, like, building a trade out of a low end card.
Yeah, I like that.
Whereas, yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Like when I'm mentally trying to build a trade box at the moment, I'm like, yeah, cool, all right. So my next trade box is going to have predominantly graded stuff,
yeah,
stuff in one touches that is if it hasn't been graded because it'll
yeah,
be of a relatively high end.
yeah,
I don't think there'll be any. Not I wouldn't high and low end's a bit tough one, but like no $2 cards. It'd be like okay stuff that's going to be value, so I can trade for something of value.
yeah,
Because that was one of the other things. Like I look in boxes, I'm like, oh, that's a good card, but I've got nothing of value to trade for it. So I
yeah.
guess I need to up my trade box if I want to
Yeah,
engage with those people. Yeah,
I think that's also part of the fun too. Is like, okay, you might not have the trade assets now, but
yeah,
you can sort of keep working on that box and
yeah,
do these small trades here or there, 2 for 1, or whatever it is to get it done. So I
yeah,
think for me, I really enjoy doing that. I think that's sort of like part of it,
yeah,
and yeah, that's the other thing too. You don't really know what is going to be the final card in all of this too. So that's I
yeah,
really enjoy that part.
yeah.
I think we should talk about comping for 2 seconds too, because I think while that you need to have a bit of leeway when you're doing trades with people, I think you do need to have a ballpark
Of
idea
course.
of what your cards are worth.
Yep.
And I'm probably going to tie this into what I saw on the weekend. So I would say I saw some pretty seasoned collectors doing some negotiating on the
Yep.
weekend. And what I was observing, and some of the words that I was hearing sort of circulating around, was that the card is actually worth, not what the comp is. You need to also factor in what the auction house fees were. So, for example, if an auction house is charging 17%, you need to deduct that off what the card is the face value of the comp, so to get the card's true value.
Yeah, I like that idea. I do think that in general, if you're trading, there's got to be flexibility.
Yeah. Well, what I was actually just going to get to then was that maybe that's what your flex is. So you're like, if it's $100 card and you've got your heart set on that, but actually you need to flex somewhere between $80 and $100 to actually, get a trade done.
Yeah.
And that's maybe like a new idea to my head that, I probably need to get my head around, or so like incorporate into like the way I'm, dealing with cards. So
yeah. Comp puts you into a ballpark. I think the negotiating starts there. Yeah, that's a really good point.
But like my point is, though, even if you're like doing 10% less than comps, you're still 10% ahead if you're going to an auction house.
Sure, but you're both.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but the other thing is the person on the other end can't go 10% of comps on yours and then over comps on theirs. Like you've got to have a meeting point and
unless it's a Damian Lillard autograph.
Of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess my final thought is, don't be too obsessive about what the actual card you're trading for. The experience itself about interacting with people and seeing what they've got, and I did like your don't get emotionally attached to the card, but don't be emotionally offended by the person if they don't want to get rid of it. It's their card. It's part of the. It's all part of the storytelling. I would comment to that though.
I would say don't stress about that, because I feel like people go out of their way to make you feel relaxed and cool about not wanting your card. So that I would say that's going to be a very pleasant one for me.
Yeah, good. And don't be afraid to say no if you're not comfortable with the trade. But be flexible. That would be my closing thought. Let's get round to tying this off. What are your final thoughts on trading?
No, I think I've said everything I wanted to say, and thanks heaps, mate. That was fantastic.
No, this is a lot of fun. We hope that everybody gets a little bit out of this. That you, I don't know, help craft a trade box. Get out there trading at your local games, your local hobby store, or at a trade show maybe. But yeah, if you're in Melbourne at one of the big ones there, I'm sure we'll see you there. If you had any other trade tips, put them below in the comments on the YouTube. And once again, thanks, Russell, and thanks everybody for joining us for another Timeless Moment.
My pleasure, mate. See you guys.